Throughout the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there has been a question asked, and that is how long can Putin actually keep this military operation going while really his own backyard isn't being, shall we say, the best tended backyard? Most notably, of course, in the Caucasus. Mainly, of course, we've seen a lot of trouble come from Chechnya. We've seen a lot of trouble come from Dagestan. And Chechnya in particular is the interesting one. So a quick brief. This is a very TDLR of this. So I know a lot of people say, you missed this out. But again, TDLR here. Essentially, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Chechnya tried to sort of regain sort of its independence. The Russian Federation newly, of course, went in to sort of say, we still have, the Russian USSR military might on our side. It did not go well. It was counted almost as a win, but a very Pyrrhic victory in many ways. And then along comes Putin to try and once again prove that, well, he is like the right choice for Russia and that he is the one who is going to restore the military honors and dives straight into the second Chechen war. But instead of, goes exactly the way the first one starts going, but then he cuts a deal with a warlord called Kadyrov. And essentially, he gives Kadyrov pretty much almost complete autonomy to act as the leader, but so long as he is and remains part of Russia. And Kadyrov is, he is terrible. He is a dictator. He rules through fear. He rules through oppression. If you annoy him in any way, shape, or form, well, you're not going to live for too much longer. And this is one of the big questions a lot of people have asked. What happens to Chechnya should someone like Kadyrov die? Because the Chechens are not exactly the most pro-Russian people. They are more scared, shall we say, of Kadyrov than they are of the Russians, and that is what is keeping them really from rebelling. You've even got right now fighting for the Ukrainians, the anti-Kadyrov faction who want to defeat Russia. But if someone like Kadyrov would die, then he doesn't have a guaranteed successor. His sons, who many assume would be his successors, do not have that very same authority that he has. So if he were to die, then the Chechen question would come up. Absolutely. What would go on there? And just as there have been many problems we've seen in Dagestan, and just as we saw when the Wagner march to Moscow, there was nothing there to stop them. They could have gone and taken Moscow. There was nothing stopping them. And just as we saw with the little rumble at the start of this war between Armenia and Azerbaijan killed Russian peacekeeping forces. And yet the Kremlin did not respond. It did not come to Azerbaijan's aid, even though it had, security pacts with with Armenia to protect them should something like that happen. They weren't there. And many people have been asking that question. What if something significant were to happen in somewhere like Chechnya, like Dagestan? What happens? Because it really does seem there's everything is, as we've said multiple times, is just, in and around Ukraine, and there's nothing else. So it could be a case of, these barrels of explosives almost being stacked up, just waiting for the right spark to come along and ignite them. And then Putin's got a massive problem in his own backyard. So we're going to have a look at this, because this today becomes quite an interesting problem and folds back into, well, what do you do if Kadyrov dies? And this comes from Politico. The Chechen warlord declares blood feud on Russian MPs for supposed assassination plot. So Before we do get into that, though, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, the one of today's link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support those as well. And of course, as you can see down below, other ways you can help support the channel. So let's crack on then into this, because I think this is very, very much worth covering just for this. So, Chechen leader Ramaz Kadyrov has accused Russian lawmakers from neighboring Dagestan and in Dukist, I think in the Instutia regions, I think is how you say it, of now plotting to kill him, and has threatened them with a blood feud should they fail to prove their innocence. He said there are witnesses and people from whom they have ordered the murder. Now asking how much they would want for an order, Kadyrov said during a meeting with Chechen security forces. Kadyrov, of course, tagged Dagestan Senator Salumi Kavrov and two state Duma deputies, Bail Kanabelvos and from Igusia, Rivan Kalvrov from Dagestan, as responsible now for this alleged plot, saying that if they do not prove otherwise, I will officially declare a blood feud. He said, of course, blood feuds in Chechnya refer to the act of avenging now a grave insult from an enemy by killing them or their relatives. So this pretty much, if Kadyrov does this, could be a start of a civil war. Like if he decides to carry this out, this could very well be a civil war. We know that there's been large problems and that Dagestan for the past couple of years has been, like that. So there are problems. And I think a lot of people do know that if they get rid of someone like Kadyrov, then almost it would be a release of a pressure valve that is keeping a lot of stuff damped down. So if he goes, it could be like open season for independence movements, rebellions, you name it. And here's the thing: Putin's busy in Ukraine. He ain't got anything to come to, whoever's aid might suddenly start calling for it. So your best chance may be right now. Because who knows how long, this opportunity lasts for you. But anyway, back to this. So at this very same meeting, Kadyrov then accused the three of being responsible for the September shooting in the Moscow office of Wildberries Russia, the Russia's wildest online retailer. It is said that the first time that the Chechen warlord, a close ally of President Vladimir Putin, was commented on the shooting, in which two ethnic Ingushetian security guards were killed. The crime took place 2 months after a merger between Wildberries and another private firm, Rus, allegedly owned by a Dagestan senator and, of course, billionaire Kalvov. In the deal that Russian media said was, of course, backed by the president's office in Moscow. Vladimir Buchenko, the estranged husband of Wildberries CEO Tanya Blakachev, was against the deal, and of course his wife backed by Putin. Balkin then joined forces with Kadyrov to then block the merger, and of course allegedly stormed the office together with other men, including several Chechens. He was later charged with murder, and of course allegation he then denies. But Kadyrov has never publicly acknowledged that his men were, of course, involved in the shootout. Instead, he described such claims now as attempts to, quote, pit entire nations against each other on domestic disputes. And here's the thing: there are plenty of domestic disputes going on, but if something like this can potentially happen, there are huge problems. And if he goes, if there is a serious, if someone does succeed in taking him out, as I said, pressure valve released. Pressure valve massively released. Because what happens then to all those, Chechenian forces of that currently pro Kadyrovs that are sort of fighting in Ukraine, not actually fighting on the front lines, but more acting like as blocker forces, to make sure that the Russians are thrown into the meat grinder. They're not actually fighting on the front lines. What happens to them? Do they go? What happens then if you're someone, a Russian conscript fighting on the Russian lines, knowing that, well, there ain't any more Chechens blocking you? Do you then follow orders? So you see the consequences of what could happen if something like this blows up. But interesting nevertheless, what could happen here. Like I say, if he does, something happen to him, well, who knows? But this is definitely something worth keeping an eye on, because if he decides to escalate, and bear in mind, this is absolutely something you would escalate, because this is the type of guy, who rules by, if you do something, I'm gonna strike back and strike back hard. So him not striking back after a supposed assassination attempt, well, that maybe makes him look weak. And maybe other people go, well, is he really as strong as he claims he is? And this is where the whole strongman thing has to sort of, assert dominance, assert, I am the one in control. I am the one with all the power. Because otherwise, if you don't, well, then people start to question that power, that authority. And he does not want that. So what happens here? Who knows? But yeah, this isn't good news for Putin at all. So, as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.